This summer on The Tonight Show.
Can actually threaten civil society.
Do you have all the answers?
Populism is right and appropriate.
Politicians brought this on themselves.
He was right. This bill does not go far enough.
Clear and forensic money trials.
A little bit dramatic.
And he was calm and composed.
That's a whole other program, I'm
With
afraid.
Vincent away, leading political analysts, journalists and commentators take a turn in the hot seat. Tune in Monday to Thursday at 11:05 on 3.
Don't forget, Thursday night on 3, Temple Street Children's Hospital. More real-life drama from the wards and theatres of Temple Street. That's Thursday at 7:30. Back to your Wednesday night, and it's over now to Vincent Browne.
Good evening. Tonight we discuss the main findings of the Cloyne report. Plus, we assess the impact the latest cutbacks will have on education in Ireland. That's after the news now with Alan Cantwell.
Good evening. The Cloyne report has criticised the former Bishop John McGee for his handling of allegations of clerical abuse in the diocese between 1996 and 2009. The Department of Foreign Affairs has confirmed tonight that the Taoiseach, Eamon Gilmore, is to seek a meeting with the Papal Nuncio to discuss the findings of the report.
It runs to 336 pages and has 27 chapters, each representing another damning indictment on the Catholic Church in Ireland. At the centre of the controversy is Bishop John McGee, who up until his resignation in March of last year was one of the most senior Catholic figures in Ireland. According to the Cloyne report, he failed to protect children and deliberately misled authorities. It praises the Church's own child protection guidelines, but says they weren't followed. On that it says they were not fully or consistently implemented, and that the primary responsibility for the failure lies with Bishop McGee. The report says it is remarkable that Bishop McGee took little or no active interest until 2008.
I humbly apologise on my own behalf as administrator of the diocese and on behalf of the clergy to all who suffered and to their families. I am appalled by the depth of damage and suffering caused by a minority of clergy in the diocese as outlined in this report.
The Cloyne report is also highly critical of Bishop McGee's child protection delegate, Monsignor Dennis O'Callaghan. There was even a complaint made against Bishop McGee himself. A person named as Joseph in the report was 17 or 18 when Bishop McGee apparently told him that he loved him and dreamt about him. The bishop embraced him tightly and at the same time inquired of him as to whether that felt good. The embrace apparently went on for a minute and Bishop McGee kissed Joseph on the forehead. The Catholic Church's National Board for Safeguarding Children found that the incident was not child abuse and so it was not reported to civil authorities. However, it was found to be inappropriate. In the light of the Cloyne report, the Minister for Justice plans to introduce new laws.
What I'm proposing to do is essentially make it an offence for a person who has information that could help in the arrest, prosecution or conviction of an offender for a serious offence committed against a child or a vulnerable adult, not to pass that information onto the Gardaí.
Combined, the various reports into the abuse of innocent children at the hands of Irish Catholic priests and the cover-up that then ensued run into thousands of pages and hundreds of chapters. But the story isn't over yet. Many victims want heartfelt apologies and compensation, while campaigners want to see even stricter child protection measures introduced. As for the Church, well, its leaders will be literally praying that we have now seen the last of these inquiries. Jerome Hughes, TV3 News.
Victim support groups voiced their anger and shock at the revelations outlined in the Cloyne report this afternoon.
Bishop McGee and Monsignor O'Callaghan misled, and the Diocese of Cloyne generally, misled the civil authorities, the Minister for Children and the HSE by insisting repeatedly that they were following the reporting requirements as in the 1996 guidelines, when in actual fact they weren't at all.
The report described allegations made against 19 priests in the diocese by 40 people. One chapter deals with Father Cloyne, who is accused of sexually abusing a girl between the age of 9 and 16 while she was visiting his home. When confronted, he admitted petting her and said that on occasion he may have gone too far. But Monsignor Dennis O'Callaghan concluded that this was classed as over-familiarity and not sex abuse. Father Calder was accused of sexual abuse between the 1980s and the 1990s. He's alleged to have spiked alcoholic drinks he gave to 5 young men, which made them weak or fall asleep. 3 of them allege they were sexually assaulted, but 2 cannot remember. The Primate of All Ireland, Cardinal Sean Brady, has apologised to the victims, saying grave errors of judgment were made and serious failures of leadership occurred. He said this is deplorable and totally unacceptable. Diane Connor, TV3 News.
The HSE has set up a dedicated help desk for people who have suffered clerical child sexual abuse. It can be contacted on 1-800-742-800 from 8 in the morning until midnight each day. The European Commission has called Moody's decision to downgrade Ireland's credit rating to junk status incomprehensible. Ireland's borrowing costs hit euro-era highs today after the announcement last night. The second quarterly review by the EU and IMF on our economic progress will be released tomorrow. Fine Gael TD Mary Mitchell O'Connor says comments made about her appearance in the Dáil-proof sexism is rampant. Yesterday, unflattering remarks by deputies Mick Wallace, Luke Flanagan and Shane Ross were picked up on microphone. That's it for now. TV3 News is back at 7 in the morning. But for now, back to Mary.
Thanks, Alan. Tonight we discuss the main findings of the Cloyne report. Plus, we will be assessing the impact the latest cutbacks will have on education in Ireland. That's after the break.
This summer on The Tonight Show.
Can actually threaten civil society.
Do you have all the answers?
Populism is right and appropriate.
Politicians brought this on themselves.
He was right. This bill does not go far enough.
Clear and forensic money trails.
A little bit dramatic.
And he was calm and composed.
That's a whole other programme, I'm
With
afraid.
Vincent away, leading political analysts, journalists and commentators take a turn in the hot seat. Tune in Monday to Thursday at 11:05 on 3.
Good evening and hello to all our viewers. I'm doing stand-in this week for Vincent Browne, who is, I hope, enjoying a well-earned holiday. Journalist Sam Smith will present the programme next week, so tune in for that. With us tonight, our Minister for State with responsibility for research and innovation, Sean Sherlock TD, Justine McCarthy of the Sunday Times and Patsy McGarry of the Irish Times. In part 2, we will be joined by former Education Minister Gemma Hussey and other well-known educationalists to discuss the impact the latest cutbacks will have on education in Ireland. If you would like to comment on the programme, you can text us 53131, but place the word "tonight" before your comment. Send us a tweet at #VNB or email us at tonight@tv3.ie. A live blog is presently being run on the website politico.ie. So, Sean, Minister of State at the Department of Education, you're from Cork, aren't you? So Cloyne is in your area, or you're in Cloyne's area?
I am
whichever
indeed,
way you want to put it. Your reaction today?
Yeah, I come from Mallow, and I've been dealing with the survivors. I don't want to call them victims, but I've been dealing with the survivors for a number of years now, and I think today for them is a little step along the road to justice, if you will. It's a minor victory, but it will be a very, very traumatic day for them at the same time. I think we should acknowledge the role of Ian Elliott. We need to acknowledge the bravery of those women and men who came forward in the first instance, because if it wasn't for people like Ian Elliott and those men and women, we would not have had this report today. And I think the clear thing that we must acknowledge also is that this report clearly showed that when these men and women came forward to people that they trusted within the institution that is the Catholic Church, they were actually re-victimised again. And so today, I suppose, marks a little bit of a watershed in that the state has now recognised the trauma that they've gone through, but still, they still haven't had that justice, in that there still haven't been the convictions that they so long for. And it's only when that happens, I think, that they will feel that they will have that natural justice.
Yes, and two things struck me. One was the fact that this isn't a far-off tale of Urawan, Fado. It's a modern, sad tale.
Absolutely, and I think the clear thing that's coming across from the report was that the church itself failed to implement its own guidelines, and there was a systematic attempt by the church authorities, the bishop and senior church officials within the Diocese of Cloyne, that when people came to them in trust and their family members came to them in trust, that they sided with the accused, if you will, or the person against whom the complaint was made, and in so doing re-victimised the families and the women themselves. So, you know, really what we need to do now is to ensure that we can set in place, you know, the proper child protection procedures. And I think, in fairness to the two ministers today, Minister Fitzgerald and Shatter, you know, there's a very clear message by government in that regard.
Indeed, Alan Shatter gave what I would call a fully rounded apology. He did. Justine, you were there today. Were you at the press conference?
I was.
And you've written a lot on these sad subjects. There's no other way to describe them. How did you find this report? It is, I understand, very well written. Yvonne Murphy has done excellent job previously on her previous reports.
It is very well written, and it builds on her first report on the Dublin Archdiocese. And there's a lot of detail in that first report that she doesn't need to go into again in this. There's so much in this report, you could talk about it forever, but you can't read it without thinking of the people, as Sean was saying, the complainants themselves. For instance, there is the case of a priest told in this report. The first complaint about him was made in 1989 to the diocese. Nothing was done about it. Another woman made a complaint in 1995. That woman, unfortunately, has died since. But she was being abused by the priest in 1989 when the first complaint was made and nothing was done about it. It is quite possible that if something had been done, she would not have been abused. And this is, you know, the theme again and again in these reports. I have to say I was disappointed today that in one respect, in the way the complainants were treated, that they were not all given advance copies of the report. They were not all formally told that the report was coming out today.
Were they gathered in Dublin?
No, they weren't.
None of them?
No, only people apparently who were in contact with 1 which has been doing wonderful work, were informed through 1 Other people weren't informed, and some people didn't know well into this afternoon that their stories were told in the report. They had been led to believe that their stories were being redacted from this version of the report, and I think that's very unfortunate. But a lot of good things are going to come out of it as well, and the legislative reforms announced by Alan Shatter and Francis Fitzgerald are really good. I'm concerned that they won't be enough until something is done to ensure that our rate of prosecutions by the Director of Prosecution's Office is increased, and that the office is encouraged to become more robust in prosecuting or possibly finding a whole new way of dealing with these cases.
And Patsy, I know that you've intensely worked on many church-state matters over the years, so perhaps you could give us what your thoughts were on the Cloyne report today.
Well, Mary, it underlines in a very clear fashion the absolute cavalier attitude of senior church figures when it comes to this issue. Bishop McGee, the report found it remarkable that he didn't play a more active interest or show a more active interest in the implementation of the church's own guidelines, which he helped prepare in 1996 and updated in 2005. He didn't bother about the implementation in his own diocese. He misled your own nephew when he was Minister for Children in 2005 after the Farron's report came out. Brian Lenihan organised an audit of all the dioceses of Ireland. He assured him that everything in his diocese was complied with church guidelines and state guidelines. He misled the HSE, and I'm using the word misled, though we could use a much more forceful one. It's the word used by the Commission. In 2007, assuring them that everything was in line with state and church guidelines in his diocese. He even withheld documentation from Ian Elliott in 2008, it was found today. He and Monsignor O'Callaghan were not frank with that man, and yet he went on to find, from the information he did succeed in getting, that child protection practices in that diocese were inadequate and in some respects dangerous. This was worse, according to the Commission. The situation was worse than Ian Elliott found it, without whom we wouldn't have this report, as Sean said earlier. What happened was Bishop McGee just ignored the thing in his diocese and left it all to Monsignor Dennis O'Callaghan, who didn't believe in the Church's guidelines. This man had taught moral theology in Maynooth for 25 years, taught many of the bishops, was involved in discussions apparently in preparing the guidelines, didn't agree with them, and so wouldn't implement them.
And where does
Mary,
Rome
can I make
come
another
into
point?
it? Yes.
And very crucially, he was backed by the Vatican.
Yes.
They issued a letter to all Irish bishops in 1997 about those guidelines, which were described by, or regarded as the official policy of the Irish Church. They said, no, they're not the official policy of the Irish Church. They're a mere study document that don't concur with canon law disciplines, and they've expressed grave reservations about the mandatory reporting restriction, or sorry, direction in those.
And was this the framework document?
Yes, the framework document is
so
how
in
it's
fact he
described.
said ignore it.
Well, that's what happened. It was ignored. The Vatican said ignore it, essentially. And
Yes.
so, as the report found, it gave comfort and support to individuals like Monsignor O'Callaghan and bishops who did not want to implement the Church's guidelines.
And the key issue there in not implementing the framework document was that when the Gardaí interfaced or interacted with, the Monsignor, he completely and utterly frustrated their attempts. But for the persistence of one detective in particular who was worthy of great praise and who pursued it like a dog chewing a bone, basically, I don't think we would be where we are today. But it was a kind of a dual personality that Monsignor O'Callaghan had, that somehow he felt more for the priest against whom the complaints were made than he did for his own people, his own flock, his own parishioners.
His arrogance was breathtaking.
And this is where...
To illustrate Sean's point, there's an extraordinary story dealing with a priest called Father Cadden, who was convicted in the course, or pleaded guilty in the course last November, and received an 18-month suspended sentence. When he met Bishop McGee on the 22nd of September 2005, Bishop McGee had recorded that meeting in two separate accounts. Father Cadden admitted the guilt. He asked for the conversation to be confidential in a priest-bishop relationship context. In that context, he admitted the guilt to Bishop McGee, who prepared a report for Rome, accounting and recounting how Father Cadden had admitted his guilt, etc. Then he went away and prepared a second report for his advisory committee, saying that the priest was shocked at the allegation, denied it completely, and that Bishop McGee had advised him he was standing him aside. This was for the local committee in Cloyne, which advised the bishop on how to handle these sort of cases. It comprised Monsignor O'Callaghan, Solicitor Diarmuid O'Cahan, a very significant figure in all of this, and a lot of lay people. In other words, he was leaving it up to them to report this to the civil authorities, and leaving it to the civil authorities to establish the guilt of Father Cadden, which he knew to be the case already.
So there was really a subterfuge going on,
Absolutely.
a complete
Total duplicity.
double account. Yes.
There was total arrogance by Monsignor Dennis O'Callaghan, because his attitude was that...
Is he still there?
He's retired. He's retired parish priest of Mallow, in fact, and retired professor of moral theology at Maynooth. But he actually described, in a book he wrote about 3 years ago, the policy of responding to complaints in the diocese as a pastoral one. He actually used the term Good Samaritan, that if somebody came to him with a complaint that they had been abused sexually by a priest as a child, his response was to kindly arrange a counselling service. And there are two very interesting figures in the report today. One is that over a period of about a decade, Monsignor O'Callaghan spent roughly €30,000 on counselling services he provided for people.
In Good Samaritan role.
And in roughly a 9-year period, the diocese spent €320,000 on legal costs, which really, I think, that sums up the nub of every report we've had about this. It's been about money and a highly legalistic response, where the lawyers end up being paid more than 10 times the cost of the counselling service to the people
And where there
who are
appears to have
abused.
been constant dodging of the issue and not facing up to the issue at all, hoping I mean, what did they think? It was going to go away?
Mary, they didn't even report these cases. I'm sorry, Sean.
Yeah, but no, but it's quite amazing, isn't it?
The report actually homes in on this point, that they didn't report 15 allegations that came to their attention between 1996 and 2005. They didn't report 9. None were reported to the health authorities. And in their own context, they initiated 5 canonical investigations. None of them were completed.
The framework document in '96 was to give some sort of faith to the parishioners that the church was now handling these incidences of child sexual abuse, and the church was supposedly going to take responsibility for this issue and grapple with it. But the parishioners in Cloyne are very disappointed because that did not come to pass. And this report, and it is Ian Elliott to my mind is the real hero here, because I think he encapsulated for some of the women, you know, their stories, which culminated in this report today. But in essence, you know, the guidelines were not implemented, and there was a clear indication within that report that cases should be referred to the Gardaí, but they were not referred to the Gardaí by the church themselves.
But I think, did they not tell them that they didn't have to report them to the Gardaí?
Well, it was even worse than that, because in one instance, Monsignor O'Callaghan did go to the Gardaí about a particular complaint, gave the guards the name of the complainant, but never told them the name of the accused priest.
Who has since been convicted.
Exactly.
Who has since been convicted. And I just wonder, as we're all talking here, and we are talking in sadness, I mean, it's right that we accentuate it, of course, anger, but how many more times will there be round tables like this in other studios, this studio? Will you both and perhaps some other minister,
There are 26 Catholic dioceses on the island of Ireland.
And John, can we ask you, what is to happen?
Well, my understanding, and I was at the press conference today, and Justine might clarify this, because you were both there today as well, but my understanding is that the minister gave a clear indication that he expected that any reports pertaining to any diocese that are there would be issued to him, if I understand that correctly. But the key point, I think, is from where we stand now as a government, as a state, as a republic, that we should now move to a juncture whereby we won't have these roundtable discussions anymore because of mandatory reporting that will arise from this, and that there's a clear demarcation that no matter what your organisation is or what your standing in life is or what kind of, or whether you wear the collar or not, that the citizen is obliged to report, and you're no longer sheltered by virtue of the institution that you happen to be a member of.
No, I think there are still a lot of questions to be answered. Sorry, Patsy, in other dioceses, and Limerick, I think, inevitably has to.
Isn't that correct?
They shared the case management committee, which was immediately disbanded after the Elliott report came out.
And a northern diocese, I think. Is there not one in? Is it Donegal?
There are questions. People are calling for investigations into Raphoe for a long time, Mary.
Yes, yeah.
Because there are very deeply disturbing aspects to what went on there.
That's true. Well, indeed, I wish that we had met. But like you said at the beginning, and everyone did, it is the people who were brave enough to come forward and to tell their tale,
and
having already been repulsed, so to speak.
It shouldn't be left to the victims anymore to push this. And something that could be done right now is this audit that Ian Elliott is conducting of all the dioceses and the orders. If it was insisted on by the state that those audits would be published, you know, that would clear up an awful lot.
Indeed.
Maybe if that office was, you know, put on a statutory footing.
Yes, perhaps.
There couldn't be this continuing dodging. We're not even permitted to know now which dioceses and which orders have agreed to be audited or have been audited.
Yeah.
But the minister did send a very clear signal in that regard today, and I think it would be very unwise of the church now to seek to obfuscate on this issue. It would be very unwise for them to do that.
Could I say on that score that both ministers today were very impressive?
Yes, I did watch it earlier myself. I thought the same. And I thought that they were remarkably open and gave of very good. They spoke very well and they laid it out very clearly. I would like to thank you for coming in and joining us.
Before we finish this matter? Any person out there who's been abused, can I ask them to go to the Gardaí? don't bother going to the church. Don't bother going to bishops or to priests. We know what will happen there. We know from 3 reports you'll be fobbed off or you'll be... And I have no confidence anymore that
So just go, you say go straight. And for that, we're flashing up the HSE helpline number now, if anyone has been affected by the issues raised. And we hope that you will avail of that if you want to. After the break, we'll be joined by former Education Minister Gemma Hussey and other well-known educationalists to discuss the impact the latest cutbacks will have on education in Ireland, along with a preview of tomorrow's papers. So Sean will be staying with us, and thank you both for coming in. Welcome back. With us are Sean Sherlock, TD, Minister of State with responsibility for research and innovation, former Minister for Education Gemma Hussey, Dr. Sean Rowland, President of Hibernia College, and Sheila Noonan, General Secretary of the INTO. Later on, we'll be joined by Owen Curry of Travel Extra, who will review tomorrow morning's papers. Well, I was thinking about this. I wanted an education night, and little did I think we would have had the sad event earlier today. But we are living in a time, and both Gemma Hussey and I would have lived through it, when there is very tight financial situation, and when the numbers in education are growing. So what is to give? We saw a debate in the Dáil tonight. Sean, you would have been there for that. And a vote put forward, a debate on SNAs, special needs assistance. And there was, it wasn't a tight vote, because no matter what we tried to talk about it, there are no tight votes anymore. But there was, I believe, a vigorous debate. And the parents of children who stand to be affected are becoming increasingly worried and frustrated about what is to be the outcome come September. So can you give some background, Sean, and maybe throw some light on what will be the outcome come September?
As it stands at present, Mary, there has been no cut in the overall
Yes, I
numbers.
do understand that. Okay. Yes, but maybe you'd say it out clearly. How many SNAs are there right now?
Well, there's about, is it 10,570 odd is the figure. I might be out one or two on that one. And there was a value for money review carried out lately, where it found that the care component, which was the basis on which the scheme was designed in the first instance, seems to have expanded in certain instances where SNAs in some cases are carrying out maybe other roles within the school, administrative and so on and so forth. And I think the first thing to say is that the overall number has not decreased. We've capped it at last year's levels.
The children coming in with needs would have increased.
Fair enough. I take the point. Yeah. We're not going to, bluff our way out of it and say that, we're going to increase the numbers. We can't. The resources are not there.
Yes, I understand that point, but there is a reserve, is there?
There's a reserve of approximately 300 where, and Sheila might correct me on those figures as well, where in emergency circumstances or in very special circumstances or where there is a dire need, there is a discretion to be able to employ those. But I think if you look at the system was designed not to create a permanent post, but to follow the care of the child from his physical care or her physical care needs, and from enrolment to leaving of the school.
Yes, I think we'll just go to Sheila now, if that's okay on that. And Sheila, I think this all arose because parents wanted children, and it was proven that they would be better in as many as possible in mainstream schools.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if we look at the last decade, one of the most positive developments, I think, in relation to primary schools, and teachers have been really welcoming the inclusion of children with special needs. It is where they should be, rightfully, in mainstream education. But of course, that has to be absolutely resourced to make it work appropriately. And there has been, there was a development and an increase in special needs assistance. But as you pointed out yourself, we're now faced into a situation where our population is increasing. and we have the philosophy of more for less with the kind of the cutbacks in public service, etc. So it's very, very challenging for schools to meet the needs of the children in the class in those circumstances. And I think those anxieties were very real that were expressed by the parents today. You know, they need a lot of reassurance. And equally the teachers, I think, for example, in the last year, we would have seen the stripping out of 700 to 800 posts in primary education. Some of those meeting the needs of very vulnerable children, all of the supports for traveller education, supports for children whose first language isn't English, you know, and some of the reduction in resources in special classes. So that makes the environment much more challenging for both the teacher and the students in the classroom. And it's in that context, your opening remarks, it is about, you know, to what extent. There's no point in talking about reducing public services. There is a sustainability. There is a point where it's no longer sustainable, or you can't argue that doing more for less will produce what you want to get out of the education system. And I think, if anything, parents who are suffering across a range of fronts want that reassurance. If my child is going to school during this recession, whatever pain I'm taking in mortgage and unemployment, at least when they come out of the other end of the education system, that they are going to be equipped and ready, hopefully, to have employment and have a reasonable standard of living.
Yes.
And I'm not entirely sure. I mean, we're certainly concerned that the signals are, with the population increasing, we're already been told by the department as part of the public expenditure review that the signals are that they want to make more payroll savings, and the only way they can do that is either increase the class sizes, and I think both former ministers here know the kind of the straw, the depth of feeling
we
that
both
it is.
tried in our own separate ways to face that away, didn't we, Gemma? I think what Rory Quinn and yourself, Sean, and the officials in education are trying to do is maybe address major headline issues such as curriculum, and you too, Gemma, and myself, and also look at patronage, and that's becoming a big issue. Though I don't know if the parents are really exercised.
Well, Mary, can I just say something?
Yes.
And I'm glad you mentioned the word patronage, because in the context of what you were discussing earlier, the Cloyne report, there are two things that strike me. The whole patronage issue has to take on much more relevance now. We have had a series of appalling disasters connected with bishops. At the same time, bishops are the patrons of the schools. Bishops are controlling the employment of teachers. They are controlling the boards of management. In fact, they are appointing the boards of management mostly. And at the same time, we have this sort of strata where the country is aghast at what's gone on. And at the same time, the people who are, you know, connected with what's gone on all over Ireland, not only in Cloyne, are the patrons, the bosses of the schools. The state is paying the bills. The parents, the taxpayers, the ordinary people are paying the bills. This raises a very big issue, and Rory Quinn was pursuing and is pursuing a change in this whole issue.
Yes, I do admire his
now it's
vigour.
Completely more relevant, all of a sudden. Just one thing I wanted to say. The other thing I wanted to say, by the way, earlier on, the TV3 very kindly gave out a number, a HSE number.
Yes,
that
we
people
did.
could
We
ring.
have it at the end.
Now, the trouble is, that HSE number is not a 24-hour number. And I have a number here for the Dublin Rape Crisis Centre, and I'd like to give it out. I've been connected with that centre.
Yes, I remember,
And
yes.
if I could give out the number, which is 24 hours, because there are people after your programme this evening, after other programmes that are very distressed.
And the dark thoughts come
in the small
night.
hours.
They
So
do.
can I just give out the number?
Yes, please say
it's
it.
1800 77 88 88. It's a 24-hour helpline, and please do ring anybody who's upset by what they heard this evening. So I'm sorry to have
thank you for doing it. And
thing.
also for giving more emphasis perhaps to the patronage issue,
Well,
which
that is an
big.
issue.
Yes.
That is,
Could
and
I
on
go
the
to
cutbacks
Sean,
issue,
to Dr.
sorry,
Rowland,
say,
yes, who is has pioneered teacher training here. How many trained teachers come from Hibernia College?
Over 4,000 primary teachers in Ireland, and we're just starting secondary school teachers.
So how many have come through Hibernia?
Over 4,000 primary teachers in Ireland have come through Hibernia and are working in Irish schools.
And perhaps
now.
you might explain, because I think sometimes people have the idea it's all online and that they're sitting in their bedroom.
Yeah, it's a blended
and they
course.
say, how can they be teachers that way?
Well, a couple of things. It's a blended course, so they go to their local education centres. They also go online, live online, and asynchronously. They also go to the Gaeltacht every summer for 3 weeks. And I think the blend of learning for graduates is ideal because they have been to college, so they have had that experience.
Oh yes, they're postgrads.
Yeah, they're all postgrad. And they also have to, they're able to stay in their communities around the country. So it widens the pool of access.
So I was amazed canvassing at the election in which we didn't get in. But several houses, I called to the woman of the house would say, my daughter's doing Hibernia, she's upstairs studying, or my son is doing it. And I said, oh, that means it's moving along.
Yeah, and there were a lot of unqualified people in the classrooms.
Well, I think the idea of taking a strong line on that.
You see, I mean, it's an interesting thing, back to the point you're making about cutbacks in education, because I think if focusing a bit on the positives, one of the things that's very interesting is we still manage to attract very top quality people into primary education. Yeah. It's a really important kind of feature of the system. We are, and I'm addressing this, I suppose, to Sean, to kind of to bring back to his government colleagues, we're facing into a situation where we have an oversupply. Now it'll be a manufactured oversupply, because with the population increasing, you know, the demand should be there for the teachers. But if they, you know, if there isn't,
if the payroll has to be looked at.
If the payroll, what we're going to attempt to do is we're going to try to deal with that with the current force. So in other words, you're going to keep bringing the additional children in, but not increasing the workforce. And there are, you know, hundreds of beautifully, wonderfully qualified young teachers, young men and women, very anxious to get into the workplace over the next few years. So, I mean, you know, it's really critical, I think, because every child goes to primary school. Yeah. You know, I mean.
Yeah, and is there any way money can be saved? I mean, okay, we know the payroll, we know the costings, but is there any block of money there? Is there, Sean?
Well, one way of saving is that we don't cost anything to the taxpayer. All of our students pay for their own education, and the Hibernia teachers pay for themselves. And if there's any surplus, it goes back into improving the programme.
And what about the teacher training colleges? Who pay?
The state.
Oh, the state.
Yeah. Well, for undergraduate, but there is a fee for
privately, all the colleges.
All
the colleges are private, and the state taxpayer funds the colleges.
And could I ask Sean, how much does it cost?
It's the same as the graduate programme at the other colleges. I think it's 9,000 and some change, 9,000 for a 2-year programme.
For a 2-year programme?
Yeah.
The question you're asking, Mary, though, is where do you find the savings? And it's a very difficult thing to do, and Sheila talks about the expenditure.
It's terrible that we're talking about savings, and we're all agreement that some savings have to be made.
Well,
but if you've got... Your listeners will probably want to know that paying pensions accounts for about 77%. You know, we spoke about the SNAs.
Absolutely correct that it should be, because all of the money in education goes directly to the front line. Because I'll tell you why. It doesn't cost anything to run a primary school. The parents don't. There's no administration cost. No, the whole. You see, this argument is trying to attack the payroll.
You've just tried to anticipate incorrectly what I was about to say.
Sorry, go ahead.
All right.
You're going to show me where you're going to find the money. Good.
No.
Yes, this block of money that we want to hear about.
Let's have an open and honest debate about it.
Right.
So you have to meet that demand. That's a given. That's rock solid. So that's, you know, so we agree on that one, I think. But it's where you find the other savings. We commit 1.3 billion to special education needs, and that has to be a given as well, and you know, we're not touching that. So where do you find the other savings? So one of the things we've committed on doing is, we'll say, rationalising the VECs from 33 down to 16.
Yes, I think Mary Coughlin had already done that. Yes, but you're continuing it.
But fair enough.
Yeah. So everything they're doing at the moment is continuing what the previous government had to lay out.
Indeed,
they had to do it. And this government is continuing it, and they have to do it.
But I would acknowledge, I'd be the first openly and honestly to acknowledge that there are some rationalisations that were carried out by the last administration that have to follow through.
That isn't a big pot of money, though, Sean.
No, but the other thing is that there is also a commitment then that we have to meet in terms of meeting the demographic challenges and population increases to build 40 more schools before 2016, as well as meeting the banding ratings of existing school demands. So there's a major challenge out there, but the expenditure review is ongoing, and that's a process that we're all aware of, and we have to find those savings.
You remember a time when you and I were facing ministers for finance, and we were the big spending department. I remember Alan Dukes bringing me into his office when he was Minister of Finance with a whole crowd of officials around, and at the end of it I had to have a stiff gin and tonic to get over what
you were lucky I didn't get that.
But the thing about it, and you remember, the problem was that the public, the teacher unions, the parents out there, all they saw was what was decided in the end. For example, like a school transport cut, what they didn't see was what we had decided not to do, which was 3 times as bad, and would have been absolutely appalling. So you just hung on to what you could, and governments today are faced with that, just as we were. You were in Fianna Fáil.
It's cyclical, you see, but
it is. But they're not even going to a Minister for Finance. It's now going.
If you look at the government, it has a pot of money to spend, and coming over here this evening, I just saw there's a bridge for 15 million approved today.
Where?
A bridge in Dublin was approved for 15 million.
Another bridge?
Now, could we put the bridge off for 2 years maybe and deal with because the education... No, it's capital and it'll create some jobs, but not if we lose jobs for education, because, health and education are 2 key areas.
This is another bridge over the River Liffey.
I read it in the paper on the way over.
Oh.
That was approved.
That.
And that's fine. It's a capital investment in the infrastructure of the country. It's a long-term investment. It'll create some short-term employment. But if kids don't get to do second class twice. And if you're a parent, we have very, very qualified teachers, but we're asking them to do more and more every year. We've integrated special needs. We've asked them to take that on board. We gave them the SNAs, and now we're looking at taking some of them away. Now, maybe we have to take, as you said, after a needs analysis, that the needs analysis shows that maybe they're not needed in every single case. But let's not strip them away from the teachers.
Yeah, and we didn't touch at all, and I wanted to briefly, if I could, on the changes that are being proposed for the curriculum at second level, because, they work back down into primary anyway, don't they? There's going to be a more rigorous, I think, testing, isn't there, at various ages?
Yeah, the junior cycle, this whole new idea of
50% is to be project.
Continual assessment.
Continuous assessment.
I tell you, I have a granddaughter who I was feeding this evening, giving her supper. She's at second level. She was furious because she's going to do the junior cycle, the junior cert, and she says it's terrible because her younger brother, who's only going to go into second level next year, he would have a different thing, it'll be much easier for him, and she's furious about it.
I don't think it'll be easier for anyone, but I think it's can curriculum advancement, can radical moves be made without, the teachers demanding extra pay?
Well, the straight answer to this, though, if we're looking at curriculum assessment, we can't remain still.
Yes.
So, you can't continue to have a system where it's, the terminal exam. It just doesn't wash anymore. It doesn't wash with industry. If you look at Project Maths, which is a very good project, in
You're
fairness...
going to be in charge of that, aren't you?
Well, in fairness to Anne Looney in the NCCA, she's done great work on this.
Yeah, she's really very clever.
I think that's the secret of the success you ask in it. The primary revision of the entire primary curriculum worked through the good model of consultation that the NCCA do.
And the important thing is that you continue that consultation with the stakeholders. One of the things that Rory Quinn has set out is this. He's going to go after the literacy and numeracy. Now, numeracy is being tackled through Project Maths. It's rolled out into 24 schools. What I want to do is take a look at it at the primary school level, but in doing so, what you do is you involve the stakeholders so that you have a good, balanced, nuanced view of it, and that it's not Department of Education primarily focused, if you will.
So it appears that there will be curriculum changes.
It's inevitable, in my view.
I think it's inevitable, but I wonder will they...
Mary, and it's important to note, and I'm sorry to cut across
you talk away. You're meant to be talking, not me.
No, but what we do is we maybe take the Bachelor of Education and put it out from 3 to 4 years, for instance.
Well, that's already happening.
Is it?
The other thing, though, is if you look at children and young people, the world they live in has information coming at them from all directions. The curriculum has to change because it has to reflect the world the children live in and embrace the knowledge and the new knowledge that's being created every day.
But there surely is still room for the old way in some instances. I mean, who remembers their childish poetry? It is what you learned in primary schools.
Yeah.
Well, you remember the Oscailga poem and you remember the English poem, and you suddenly think, I learned that off.
Yes, but
are we going to put all that out the window?
We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
And I mean, I've heard you in the Dáil quoting poetry actually on a few occasions.
Oh, dear.
And in fairness, but what you have is a 50-50 scenario potentially, or a 60-40 scenario.
Yeah.
And like on Sean's point, Irish school kids are probably the most digitally literate students in within the OECD. But if you look at the PISA figures, which are, and I had to write it down, the Programme for International Student Assessment, and the OECD figures, the rankings on maths are coming down, so we have to address that.
You'll have to all come back another night, because they're telling me things through my ear, which in a note Vincent Browne left for us all, it says, don't listen to them, but I have to listen to them. But we're joined by Owen Corrie, who's going to talk us through tomorrow morning's papers.
Mary, more Cloyne, and in newspaper terms, what happens on a night like this is called an avalanche. They just clear page after page. Terrific front page in the Irish Examiner, the
Irish Examiner. Wait, we'll do them in order. I think the Irish Examiner is what you're going to look at first. Please feel free to join in, anybody who wants to. So you're looking at the Examiner, Owen, are you?
Yes. It takes 8 key phrases out, runs them across a photograph of Bishop McGee, and the Irish Times, again, 4 key phrases out of the 27 chapters of the report: inadequate, inappropriate, ineffective, entirely unhelpful. The EU leaders struggle under debt crisis, the off-lead. That's running all across mainland Europe tonight as the main story, particularly that little standoff that we have between Michel Barnier over ratings and the impact they have, but it's really relegated out of what we have, that bit of a haymaker that was delivered into the church tonight by Yvonne Murphy's report. The Irish Independent also is leading with Cloyne, and we have one major exception to all the newspapers leading on Cloyne, and it's the Irish Sun. There we see the real big story, as far as they're concerned, for the morning. All Ireland talent shown the door. That's Browne Shoiga, Dloche Galgora, and waving at us a little goodbye. 800,000 viewers, quite a substantial viewership, but they've decided that the format of the All Ireland Talent Show needs to be changed. So that's the lead story.
And there's a wee sidebar here. Fraud trial for judge.
It's a really interesting one. That's Judge Perrin, and it relates to a case before she was appointed a judge. Obviously, it's in the court, so we can't make any comment at all about it. But the allegation is that a will was influenced, and it led to a court appearance today. She's been released, and the trial will take place. But again, we're in the situation where it's an allegation. Lots of Rory McIlroy as well. He's 8-1 to win the Open, the British Open. 8-1. I wouldn't be putting my money on him, Mary. I would actually go for Graham McDowell. If Rory, considering the 3 weeks he's had, a top 10 finish would be terrific for him. And I think we might get our 3rd Irish winner in 5 years, Graham McDowell. That's where I'll be rooting for myself over the next few days.
Well, have you your money? Are you going to put on your money?
I might. I don't bet. It's the sentence of ignominy if I bet on anything. It's also, I'm interested, the gender balance here tonight is 3-3. But
about time.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. We've two World Cup semi-finals tonight. Can you imagine if we had 2 soccer World Cup semi-finals in a men's sport? In men's soccer, but it's virtually uncovered that Japan and the USA have qualified for the
Actually, interesting. You would have this page on. It's in the Irish Times Opinion and Analysis, and it brings out a point you made, Gemma. It's Mayor Raftery. It's for as long as we persist in giving bishops complete responsibility for our children's safety, we've an absolute duty to, and it goes on there. So that will make for good. Awful
I suspect the focus is going to move. The way newspapers work is they all chase one particular angle together in one day. The avalanche, I called it. The avalanche will continue for the rest of the week. I think the focus will probably moving towards Sean Brady. The Irish News tonight, by the way, is also focusing on John McGee. He's from Newry, and rather than on Sean Brady. But when it came to the Crown, Sean Brady really backed John McGee against Dermot Martin's position. And Dermot Martin has the only member of the church who seems to be coming out of this smelling of roses.
Yes. Well, thank you all for coming. We could stay tonight and start again tomorrow morning, but we just haven't got the time. But thanks for watching, and from all of us tonight, good night. And thank you, Gemma, for giving us the other number.
Yes, it's another kick.